All right, this week I'm happy to present somebody that we're going to get to know together. Actually, that's not completely true. Yesterday I recorded an interview with this guy and nothing recorded. So this is my second recording with him, your first thing that you're going to get to hear, but it'll be great because I really had a nice time talking with him yesterday. His name is Florent Ghys. He's a friend of Todd Reynolds. Todd suggested that he would be a good subject for a chat, and I'm glad to talk to him. So with that, I'll say hello to Florent. Florent, how are you?
I'm good. Hello, Darwin. I'm very happy to be a part of this podcast, surrounded by so many amazing people. It's an honor to be here.
Yeah, well, it's I feel really lucky that people will actually talk to me, so there's that. So why don't we start off by having you explain to people what you do?
Okay, so I'm Florent Ghys. I come from France. I'm a composer, so I write music for ensembles and performers for like classical and contemporary setups. I also composed music for a few movies and documentaries. I am also a double bass player, so I have an education in double bass, classical and contemporary performance. I played double bass in a few ensembles and orchestras. I'm also doing weird experimental music videos. So I have absolutely no education in that, but I'm just having fun messing around with musical ideas in videos, and for now I'm just doing that for myself. But a friend of mine asked me to do the music video for a piece of him, so it's going to be the first time that I'm going to do video for a project that's not my music. And also, as much as I have a hard time describing myself as a programmer, because I'm not a programmer, I'm not a coder. I don't really write lines of code, so I don't feel good with that. But I happen to have learned Max. In 2007, 2009, I was working as a part-time superintendent in a building, and I was bored, and I would just like did the tutorials by myself. And so even though I still need to learn a lot, and I wouldn't say that I'm the best Max programmer. I usually manage to make the stuff I want work. So I've done a few Max patches for myself, for my music, for other people. And somehow a few years ago, I tried to combine all these different things into a solo for double bass, laptop and videos using Max and playing my own music. And yeah, this is what I'm doing.
Yeah, well, that's a lot of different things, and that's pretty exciting stuff. Let's talk a little bit about this combination of working with Max, and I assume with a laptop, and because the pictures I've seen of you use a laptop, and the double bass. It seems like kind of an odd combo. What is it like just even interfacing those two tools?
Yeah, that's an odd combo, but I think there's something I like about it. The idea of mixing like this old wood instrument that's been, around for centuries, and this like totally new technology. The thing is, I also I kind of like the idea of not seeing the computer on stage and having the tech kind of disappear from the show.
Right.
But at the same time, I have a sort of, like maybe like an avatar of the computer, because I have this iPad, this tablet that's on my double bass. It's attached to it. Oh, so yeah, I put it with like this, this paste where you can attach busters to a wall.
Oh yeah, right.
So I just put that, and it works great.
And it doesn't harm the bass?
No, it doesn't. It doesn't hurt the varnish. It's totally fine.
Okay.
So yeah, it's really like this mix of like new technology with like old technology. I really like it. And also what I like is that it's kind of like a transparent thing where people can see what's going on the iPad, even though they're not really going to understand what's going on. There are like colors, there are dials turning. I have a metronome, stuff like that. That I like this idea of having a computer that's transparent, because if you go to see a solo laptop performance, unless you go on stage in the back of the guy, you don't really see what's going on his screen and what he's doing. So I kind of like this idea of having a sort of computer that's disappearing, but still it's there and it's totally transparent and people can check out what's going on.
It seems to me like you're doing a lot to sort of break down some of the problem areas of doing laptop-based performance, because if nothing else, the double bass, it's big, it's imposing, it sort of like forces itself into the consciousness of the people watching you perform, right? And also the sound it makes almost has a physical nature to it.
Yeah, that's something is like, I feel like doing a performance with a double bass and a laptop is really not balanced, because the double bass is a pretty big instrument with like very low frequencies and I feel the computer can do like so many things. It's I don't know. I like being on stage with my bass. I feel more comfortable being on stage solo with my bass than solo with the computer.
Sure, that makes sense. To what extent does the fact, if I just put myself in your shoes with that, there's actually a lot of things that occur in that kind of environment that are probably comfortable. So not only is it an instrument that you've apparently spent a lot of time on, but also it's something that you kind of wrap yourself around. It sort of speaks through you, through your own body, right? Mm-hmm. But you can also kind of hide behind it because it's so big. And you can shock people by, the acoustic volume that it's able to produce. So I can imagine that there's a lot about working with that that's kind of an additional comfort factor when you're doing performances.
Yeah, I don't really think about it because it's just my instrument, so It's just what I'm doing. But,
Let's talk about that now. How did you, given all the things that you do, and we're going to get into some more detail on that in a bit, but I'm curious about what is the road that you've taken to become the artist that you are?
Okay, so I grew up, I come from Bordeaux in France. It's in the south of France. I grew up in this residential neighborhood in Bordeaux, kind of boring, nothing really to do there. From a family of non-musicians at all. My parents really don't listen to music. They're listening to a lot of radio, though. They always have the radio on. And then I believe around like 5, I began studying classical guitar. From 5 to 10 or 11, something like this. Then around 11, I was listening to a lot of like, I don't know, I had a poster of Slash in my, like the Guns N' Roses guitarist in my bedroom. I was listening to Nirvana and all these like metal and hard rock bands. And so playing like Bach minuets on the classical guitar didn't work for me. So I switched to the electric guitar, which was much more fun at the time. And I had long hair and I was playing in rock bands. That was also at the time where I was like a big video game player. I played a lot of NES, Nintendo Entertainment System. And I believe it's around when I was like, 12 or something that the Super Nintendo was released in France. And it was like a mind-blowing thing for me. And then, I don't know, when the bass player of a rock band I had was pretty bad. And I remember I had to show him the bass lines the electric bass, and I remember liking it right away. I was like, I like these low frequencies, the role it has as being like the foundation of a piece of music. So I began playing the electric bass for a few years in like jazz, funk, rock bands and stuff like that.
Right.
That's at the time also where I signed up for the computer music class at the Conservatoire of Bordeaux. At the time, it was pretty limited, but I was really interested in the idea of like combining this like video games thing and this attraction I had for computers with the music I was making, even though it was very limited. It was fascinating at the time. And then I went to the university. I went to musicology. And I started the classical, the upright bass, the double bass. I started to learn that. I graduated a few years later with a master's in ethnomusicology, where I worked on Egyptian music. And then I decided to focus on double bass performance. So I went to Paris, and I really worked on like the classical repertoire and orchestra playing and stuff like that. And then, and then I was in Paris, and I was kind of not super excited. It was like 10 years ago or something, 2004. I was about to get graduated, and I was feeling a little isolated from with the music I was beginning to do, and also I feel like the music scene at the time in Paris was very in boxes. So you had to do classical or contemporary or electronic, but you couldn't do something that was in between. It was a real issue at the time. I discovered Bang on a Can, the New York-based organization. At the time on internet, I was just checking out, and there are these three composers, David Lang, Michael Gordon, and Julia Wolf.
Right.
And I discovered their music. I was by myself in Paris, and I was like, wow, this is the best thing ever. I want to meet these guys. And it happened that they had this summer festival every year in Massachusetts at Masmoka. And Steve Reich was the guest, and I was like, I need to go there. So I went there, and it was like a real life-changing experience, because I met all these amazing people, amazing players who had not exactly, but like kind of the same backgrounds as the one I had, and everybody was happy, and I was like, wow, this is the place where I want to be. So from that time, I was back and forth between Paris, Bordeaux, and New York. I was trying to go back once a year or something. And then I decided a few years later, like 4 years ago, I decided to go back to school. And I had a master's at NYU Steinhardt, New York University Steinhardt, where I studied music composition with Julia Wolf. I graduated 2 years ago. And now I'm doing a PhD at Princeton University. Woo, that was long.
Yeah, well, but that's a heck of a trail that you're cutting there. A couple of questions. First of all, you didn't start learning bass until you were at the university?
Yeah.
Upright bass?
I started around 18, 19.
Okay.
19, I think.
How hard was it? I mean, typically people, by the time they're in university, they already kind of have an instrument that is their instrument, and they're already pretty good at it.
Yeah.
It seems a little odd that you would start that late.
Yeah, I know. I mean, it's not that odd for double bass. Usually double bass is an instrument you can start late, but...
Why is that? Why is that particularly the case?
I mean, there are some kids starting the double bass, but it's not the most rewarding instrument when you're a kid. Yeah. And
also, it's probably physically demanding too.
Yeah, it's pretty physical. So I believe it's why people can start later. But yeah, for me, I had issues because I had to pick up an instrument from the conservatoire, and I was at the time, I remember I had dreadlocks, and I I was playing the electric guitar, I was playing flamenco on the guitar, I was playing bossa nova, I was playing the electric bass, I was playing the djembe, the didgeridoo. I was doing weird computer stuff, and nothing was really working in a classical conservatoire at the time. So I went back doing like what I've done when I was a kid, which was classical guitar. But I don't know, something was not really working for me, and I figured that I could start this instrument and actually go pretty fast because I already played a few instruments, and I was already a musician for a few years, so I could actually catch up and go pretty fast at it. So
you eventually focused on ethnomusicology, and you said that your kind of specialty was Egyptian music, which I have to admit, I don't think I know any Egyptian music.
Okay.
So what does that mean, and what effect did that music maybe have on you?
I don't know what effect it has on me. I think it happens on a lower level thing where you listen to a lot of things and somehow you digest these things and somehow it comes out maybe unconsciously in the music. So right. I'm not really thinking about like quoting Egyptian music in my pieces.
Okay.
But maybe some stuff happens. I'm not sure. Should definitely check out Egyptian music. There are very beautiful things in the 70s and 80s was like the golden age of Egyptian music. Cairo was like the art center of the Arabic world. There are like tons of amazing singers and composers writing these like hour-long pieces for orchestra and singers, incorporating like electric guitars and quarter tones on the violins, and there are like really, really beautiful works.
Sure. What are the things that make Egyptian music unique? With the use of electric guitars and stuff, maybe it's changing now. Mm-hmm. But what are the things that you could kind of hang your hat on from an ethnomusicologist's standpoint?
Yeah, what I was really interested in is that I don't really know what's going on today in Egyptian music at all. But what was interesting for me is that traditionally Egyptian music and Arabic music was just one melody, a monody or homophony, I think we call that, where everybody's playing the same melody at the same time, right. But it's approximately the same melody in the way that there are improvised ornaments. So everybody's kind of playing the same thing at the same time, but it's not exactly the same thing. So it's like this thick melody. So that's like the traditional Arabic music or Egyptian music. And somehow it like transformed into a more Western system with harmonies and chords. And somehow the bass line played a part in that transition from a monody to a harmony world. By becoming independent, the bass line implied harmonies, and so I was interested in like this transition and how the bass played a role in that transition.
Oh, that's really interesting. The one thing that I have heard of or kind of studied in the past that kind of had that mechanism was the changing music of Jamaica and how it became reggae through sort of like this influence of Western music, but how they also used some of their own sort of like unique perspectives and unique indigenous musics to sort of make a very unique end result.
Yeah, that's very fascinating. I think for me, that's something that's the best in the globalization. It's that the acculturation. It's when a culture takes something from another culture and makes it its own, and is going to use like Western instrument, but in a different way.
Right.
It's really. And it's interesting, too, because I remember at the time when I was working in ethnomusicology, that's something that's really not valid. Because as soon as there was like electric guitars or synthesizers in Egyptian music, ethnomusicologists would stop studying, saying this is not Egyptian music anymore. This is bad music. I was like, no, it's been there for like 20 years now. Maybe we could consider it, and we should analyze this music too, and it's actually very interesting because they're using synthesizers with quarter tones and stuff like that. So why not analyzing this too? And
that is such an amazingly sort of like Western view of things, right? Which is like, we really want those primitive people to stay primitive. Well, nobody themselves actually wants to stay primitive. They just want other people to do it, right? So you say that you don't think that it's really affected you, or no more than other kinds of music?
Yeah, I don't know. I like, one of the bases of Egyptian music is to use quarter tones and these makams, which are these modes, scales they're using, and I've never used that in my music. So I don't know. It's hard for me. I think I'm not thinking really about what I'm doing. I'm just doing the things I'm doing, and then maybe after a few months or years, I can actually be like, oh, I totally steal that idea from this piece, but I don't really realize it right away.
Right.
Yeah.
So you said that now you are at Princeton studying for a PhD. What's got you interested in doing a PhD? Because it seems, looking at your resume, it seems like you're doing a lot of stuff that people want to do. You're composing, working with the Bang and Can people and others. You're doing soundtracks and all this stuff. It seems like you're already in the game. What is it about a PhD that's going to enhance that?
Yeah, I already spend a lot of time in schools, and I don't really need to spend more time in school. You're right, but at the same time, I've spent a few years outside of school, and as I was saying earlier, I had this feeling of being very isolated, and when I was in France, so I moved to New York, and what I'm really enjoying here is to be surrounded by all these amazing teachers we have, and the students are pretty awesome too. Everybody's like doing his own thing, and it's a great energy. It's very inspiring. When you get stuck, you can talk to people. You have these facilities where we have a few recording studios that are open 24/7. It's just like 3-minute walk from my place. So it's just an ideal situation for just not spending time with boring stuff and just focusing on your art. And it's just ideal. It's almost like a dream. I feel like I'm in a weird place where everybody's happy and everybody's doing great things, and it's pretty good. I'm really enjoying that.
Well, at Princeton too, you have some access to some of the nicer people in the composition and electronic music world. I mean, Dan Truman's just a wonderful guy to work around anyway, and Jeff Snyder's there right now, right?
Yep, he's there too.
Yeah. He's an incredibly talented and interesting guy as well. So I can see where you can get a lot of inspiration from that. But now Princeton that's in New Jersey, right?
Yes, it is.
How far from the city? How from New York are you?
It's like an hour and a half south. It's halfway between New York and Philly.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah, an hour and a half, depending if you're driving or taking the train.
I see. Okay, well, that's not so bad then. And boy, if you want a place where you're not going to be isolated, New York is going to be it. Yeah. You're going to be able to find 1,000 people into whatever you are, no matter what you're into, I think. But that's fantastic. So how do you find it to be, having come from France and kind of dropping into New York, how difficult was it for you to establish yourself in that environment when it is kind of an aggressive place in terms of, people want to work with the best people. That's why they're there. How hard was it to get established in the city?
I don't know. I think it was harder for me in France, and even though in Paris it's in New York it's tough, and there are like so many people very talented doing a lot of things. I always felt there is something very encouraging about New York. People, I don't know, people are nice and like encouraging, and nobody really cares about where you're coming from or what studies you've done. It's more about, I mean, it's more like the American way of like, show me what you're doing, and if I like it, that it's great. In Paris, it's more like, who are you? Who did you study with?
Oh,
and if that's cool, I might listen to what you do. I mean, I'm talking also like Paris, like 10 years ago. So it sounds like it's changing a little bit too nowadays. But yeah, there is something I really enjoyed in New York, is this idea of accessibility, or you can go to a concert or a show and then talk to the guys, even if they're like super famous, and usually they talk to you, which is pretty awesome. And it never happened to me in Paris, for example, where if you're not introduced or if you're not in a circle of people, it's harder, I feel, to get in touch with the artists. And so, yeah, I don't know if I really answered your question.
Well, sort of. I mean, it's interesting because I hadn't thought about it that way, but the different environments, depending on how much people respect like authority and bureaucracy, that's going to change the way that they interact when a new guy shows up. And certainly in New York, my experiences there as well have been that if you can do something well, people want to talk to you about it and find out about what you can do, and maybe you can collaborate, or maybe you can help them with something, or maybe they just want to see what you're doing. Mm-hmm. But it does seem to be a very open from that standpoint. You don't have to show your credentials before you show your work, right?
Exactly.
And that's pretty encouraging. So do you still get into the city pretty often?
Yeah, I do. I take the shuttle, the New Jersey Transit with my double bass, and the subway stairs, and yeah, I'm doing that pretty often.
That's got to be a trip, hauling that around on the train.
Yeah. Thinking about getting a car, but I don't have a car yet, so I'm just taking the train.
Have you thought about like finding some like incredibly tiny bass to use instead?
I actually do have a travel bass, which is like a stick that fits in a sort of like golf bag.
Okay.
But I don't know. The idea of it is great. It's like a foldable neck.
Right.
So it's actually pretty small and pretty light, and I like the idea of it, but then playing it is just a different thing. I don't like playing it. I don't feel the same things. I never find a way to get the sound. So it doesn't really have any bass. So I need to put up with that and like add more bass in my pickup. And I never managed to find a good sound either. So I don't know. I like the idea of it, but it's
the reality isn't there, right?
Yeah.
That's kind of funny. I have to admit that I have tried using some of these kind of travel instruments. I was a guitarist for a long time.
Yeah.
And I tried a number of these instruments that were going to be conceivably easier to travel with, and the problem was, for me at least, the complete lack of any feeling of resonance to my body. Mm-hmm. Just made it felt like I was playing the instrument from across the room. Right? Yeah. It didn't seem like I could connect to it.
Yeah, it's interesting. I hadn't played the electric bass in maybe a few years or something, and I played an electric bass the other day, and for me the first reaction was exactly what you're describing, was that the sound was coming from the amp. And it was so weird for me that the sound didn't come from the instrument itself. I mean, it's coming, but that was interesting. This idea that the source, the sound source, is not coming from the instrument. I was like,
it's so different, right?
This is so different.
So now there's another thing I want to kind of quiz you on, which I'm really curious about. Mm-hmm. You said that you were not trained as a programmer, or really kind of as a technologist at all.
Yeah.
But you got a job, a part-time job as a super in a building. you were bored and you learned Max. That sounds like a very improbable tale. But it also sounds like an interesting one. How did you just, because a lot of people first learn Max through a class in university or something like that.
Yeah.
Or now there are a couple of really good books out that can kind of help you get started, especially from a musical perspective. But I'm curious, what was it like learning this kind of in isolation? But also, how did you decide what to learn? Because with Max, there's 700 things you can learn.
Yeah.
And picking one or the other is actually kind of a lot of work. How did you make those decisions?
For me, it's because of a friend of mine, Florent Ghys, who is a composer based in Paris. At the time I was using Ableton Live, was like maybe 10 or 11, 12 years ago, something like that.
Okay.
I was using Ableton Live, and I believe it was Live 4 or something, which was pretty limited. And there were like a lot of things I wanted to do that I couldn't really do in Live. And this friend of mine, Florent, came to me and he wrote that piece for double bass and electronics that I played several times. And it involved a Max patch. And it was the first time I actually saw a Max patch, and I began like editing it and checking out and asking him questions about it and being like, okay, but if I press the pedal, and can I have like a decrescendo after 10 seconds and then it stopped the samples? I was like, sure, look. Blah, blah, blah. I was like, that was another mind-blowing experience for me. Like all in a sudden, it totally changed the way I was thinking about using computers, because everything sounded free and I was free to do whatever I want. And this idea of building something too, this idea that I've never built any objects or anything, and all in a sudden I had the power to, I had to learn before, but I could have the power to build things on the computer, and it was pretty impressive. So at first I kind of like tried to just reuse the patch he did and like copy and paste and make it bigger, and then I was like, okay, I really need to understand deeply what's going on. And so I just started with just like, I think it's the first tutorial. It's like I just started in the order Max, and then I did MSP, and then I did a few years later Jitter.
Right.
And then I don't know. I've always been also very interested in. That's a project I'm still working on, and the idea of using Max as a composition tool, as a way to create MIDI material for compositions. I'm using that a lot, like random note generators, but like kind of elaborated random note generators where you can control the density and like the scales and stuff like that. And I'm also working with the library Bach.
Yes, the Bach library.
The music notation stuff. Yes. And I'm really interested in the idea of doing a real-time composition stuff where performers would sight read the music that's generated in real time.
Right.
Stuff like that. So I began with Max, and then I was like, okay, now I know Max, and I'm gonna try to do what I was doing in Live, but in Max. And then I learned MSP. I still have a lot of things to learn and a lot of things that I don't really understand yet, but I'm getting better.
One of the things that I find, and it's really kind of peculiar among musicians and artists, is that they get frustrated when they talk about doing programming or coding, because they feel like, well, I don't know, there's a lot of things I don't know, so that makes me not accomplished at programming. Mm-hmm. But if you talk to them about their instrument or about music composition or whatever, they're more than happy to say there are 10,000 avenues in composition, and I know a few of them that I really enjoy, and so I focus on that. You know, it's sort of like for composition, it's okay not to know everything, but in programming, somehow that's not acceptable.
Yeah, you're right. I don't know what it is about it. There's something. Maybe the opposite is true too. We should ask a programmer who's not a composer
Yeah.
if it's the same feeling.
If
But
it's right, that's actually a great point, right?
I feel, yeah, for me there is something very impressive because I'm always, I don't know, there is something about confidence, and the more you do something, the more confident you get about it, and then you can, just like, even like me, when you asked me at the beginning of this talk what I was doing, just me saying that I'm doing videos, it's kind of a new thing, and it's something I've been doing for years. It's just that now I feel a little more confident doing videos because I worked a lot on it, and I'm like, okay, I can say I'm doing videos.
Right.
And I think it's the same thing with programming. It's like, it's so big and so impressive, and there are like all these words and all these like technical things related to the way the computer works, and there are a lot of things that at first it's like it's very impressive, and when you do your first max patch that works, you don't say I'm a programmer. You're like, right. Oh, I don't really know how, but I make this work, you know. And
well, that is a great point, which is that you have to kind of work yourself up to being willing to call yourself a programmer,
mm-hmm.
or whatever. It's also, to me, it's really fascinating to hear that you actually started with Max by working with someone else's Max patch, which I think that's unusual, but maybe it's not unusual for you because, you know, one of the things that we keep on reiterating when we talk about stuff is this desire not to work in isolation. You like working with other people and interacting with them. And in fact, with some of your max patching, you've actually done max patching for other people as part of their work, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that's kind of interesting that you found a way to make programming, or at least max patching, you found a way to make it sort of a social part of your life.
Yeah. I mean, for me, I really had to see Max in action for me to be willing to spend that time to learn it.
Sure.
I already had, a few years before, I had like an introduction to Max, and as much as I totally loved this introduction, it was too abstract, and I was like, I'm not a programmer. It's too much work for me. I'm a musician. I don't have time to do this. And then it's really when my friend like put this patch on my computer, and I was with my computer checking this out, and I really had to see it with my eyes.
Right.
And then when I saw it, I was like, I realized all the possibilities that could that I could do with it, and but I had to see it with my eyes. And then, I don't know, I spent a lot of time on the internet, on the forum, just asking questions and asking my friends too. I have a few friends who work in Max as well.
So let's talk a little bit about your explorations into video. So one of the things that's interesting to me is that when I look on your website and I do a little research on you, sort of your interaction with video is kind of a big deal. You know, it's getting notice, or at least it seems to me. How long have you been working with video?
It's been something like 10 years or something.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I don't know. I began like 10 years ago doing weird stuff with weather reports, and using the speech melody, where you use the inflections, the inflection of the speaking language to build a piece of music. I used that, and but at the time, like, it was hard to do videos on a laptop, and now it's getting much better. So I'm doing more things now. What was your question again?
Well, I mean, so no, you answered the question, which is how long you've been working with it. How long have you been performing now with it? Because video is kind of a part of your performance, right?
Yeah, it's a very new thing. It's so I released my album Television in November, and I began playing these pieces in November. So it's only been a few months that I'm doing this with videos in real on a live performance.
Sure. Now, one of the things I always find fascinating is how people cross over from one kind of media art to another. So you're a very accomplished musician and composer and stuff. How hard did you find the transition to the visual world? And what's been the reception of people to this work? I tend to find that people who are coming at video from sort of a music background actually tend to do very interesting work because they have a different perspective on the value of video, right?
Yeah, exactly. I think for me, I really enjoy working on videos because I feel like a kid playing with toys, and I'm not really thinking about what I'm doing. I'm just doing experiments and I'm having fun. And I don't feel the weight of history that sometimes I feel because I when I write music, because I studied a lot music. When you have to write a string quartet and you spend all these years studying music history, about what's been written before, and you always have this kind of like pressure of what can I do to make this string quartet interesting, or to make this string quartet mine, and all these like considerations. I really like the playful aspect of playing with the media you actually don't really know, and you're learning it at the same time. And I'm coming up with all these ideas and things, and I have a few friends who are filmmakers, and when they see my videos, they always see like the bad things, and they're like, "Oh, this is the focus is bad, and the exposure is bad, and the edits are going way too fast." And I'm like, in a way, I'm as much as I really want to get better and improve in videos and learn more, I also don't really care. I'm just doing the stuff I want, and I'm really enjoying that idea of playing with the media that I don't really know that much.
Right.
As like a fresh aspect to it.
Well, you get to kind of find your own naive voice too, right?
Mm-hmm.
Instead of like you said, having to have everything weighed down with centuries of history. That's cool. So we've already burned through our time. It's unreal. But before we go, I do want to ask you a question that I like to ask people, which is, if you could meet like a 18-year-old version of yourself, what would you tell that person to either make things easier, or make things more focused, or maybe make things harder? I don't know. But what would you say to somebody in order to help them on their way?
It's a hard question, because I feel like times have changed so much since I was 18 that it's not the same world we're living now. But I think I would say, be yourself. Don't try to copy things, and just try to be yourself and be happy in what you're doing. I think that's the main thing I would say to myself, or to someone who's 18 or 20.
Sure. That's great advice. Well, Florent, thank you so much for your time. Where can people go to find your work?
I have a website, Florent Ghys, FLORENTGHYS.com. It's my name. There are like a lot of things on my website.
All right, fantastic. And that'll have routes to because I ran into some of your work on YouTube, which I found really cool. All that stuff is all linked from your site, right?
Yeah.
Okay, fantastic. Well, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate you taking the time and for being open and willing to talk about the background. That's really great.
Thank you.
All right.
It's a pleasure.
Have a great day. Bye.
Bye.
Okay, and there we have it. Thanks so much to Florent for spending the time with us. It was a great time. It was really interesting, particularly to hear about how he thinks of both working with the bass as well as working anew with the medium of video. So thanks for that. Thanks to you for listening. I hope you enjoyed. If you have any ideas for people that I should interview, I've been getting emails about it. I'm sorry if I haven't got back to you, but don't think I'm not reading, because I am. But send me your ideas, or particularly if you yourself think you should be interviewed, drop me a line and I'll reach out to you. Thanks a lot, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.